So, where did professional theater in America actually begin? It wasn't in some grand New York playhouse, no. It started on a ship right in the middle of the Atlantic. This is a story about a failing theater, a desperate family, and one single all or nothing voyage that completely changed American culture forever.
The year is 1752, and this ship, the Charming Sally, is carrying way more than just passengers. It's literally holding the entire future of American performance art. You see, this wasn't just a trip. It was a huge gamble that would either launch a brand new cultural tradition or end in absolute complete disaster.
So you gotta ask, what would drive an entire company of actors to just abandon London, the center of the theater world, and sail across a dangerous ocean? Well, the answer lies back in the city, where for them, the show was pretty much over. Back in London, a theater manager named William Hallam was staring bankruptcy right in the face. His theater was getting totally crushed by superstars like David Garrick. But then he looked across the ocean, and the American colonies, well, they were a blank slate. A massive, untapped audience with no professional theater to speak of. So William comes up with this wild idea. He'd fund a new company to go tour the colonies. But he wasn't going to lead it himself. Oh, no. He tapped his younger brother, a kind of struggling actor named Lewis Hallam Sr., to manage this incredibly risky venture. And this was a true family affair. I mean, Lewis wasn't just risking his own career. He was asking his entire family to pack up their lives. His wife was a successful actor in her own right, and their 3 young kids were already growing up on the stage. He was asking them to leave everything they knew behind for a total shot in the dark. Okay, so the plan is set, the family's on board, but now they face the most dangerous part of the journey, actually crossing the Atlantic itself. And let me tell you, this was no pleasure cruise. The voyage took 6 long weeks, but they didn't waste a second of it. The company turned the ship's quarterdeck into a rehearsal space, running through 20 different plays with the waves pitching and the sea spray flying. Can you just picture that? It's an incredible image, right? But it does bring up a pretty practical question. How in the world do you actually rehearse Shakespeare in the middle of a storm? Well, the reality was anything but glamorous. During one rehearsal of The Merchant of Venice, the seas got so rough that Mrs. Hallam, who was playing Portia, had to make a run for the ship's rail and got violently ill. And she wasn't alone. Soon, a few other cast members joined her. It was a brutal but pretty amazing testament to their dedication. But somehow, they made it through. And on June 2nd, 1752, they finally landed in Yorktown, Virginia. And now, the real work began. Building an audience, a theater, and a reputation. All from scratch. On September 15th, they opened their very first show in Williamsburg. A member of the company delivered a prologue that just perfectly captured the gravity of the moment. They knew they weren't just putting on some play. They were announcing the arrival of an art form to a new world. And that first show, it was the very same play they struggled to rehearse through seasickness, The Merchant of Venice. And it was a huge success. The gamble had actually paid off. Professional American theater was officially born. But this is a drama we're talking about, after all. And that initial triumph was followed pretty quickly by immense hardship, and a tragedy that almost ended the whole thing right then and there. So, despite drawing good crowds, the company's finances were a total mess. It got so bad that Lewis Hallam had to sell their brand new theater, all the costumes, all the props, just to pay off their debts and stay out of prison. They really had no choice but to pack up and move on. Looking for a warmer climate and maybe a more welcoming audience, the Hallams sailed to Jamaica. But what they found there wasn't a fresh start. It was a devastating end to an era. In Jamaica, Lewis connected with another theater manager named David Douglas. But not long after they arrived, Lewis came down with a tropical disease. And in 1755, the man who had led this incredible journey died, leaving his wife, his kids, and his entire company stranded thousands of miles from home. Now, this really should have been the end of the story, the end of the road, right? But through a combination of foresight and some very clever rebranding, the company found a way to survive. Even on his deathbed, Lewis was thinking one step ahead. He urged his wife to merge their company with David Douglas's troupe. He saw Douglas as the only person who could secure a future for his family and for the legacy he'd started to build. Now, Douglas was a really sharp operator. He knew that up in the Puritan-influenced northern colonies, theater was considered sinful,
It was often just straight up illegal. So he came up with this genius workaround. He wasn't going to stage plays, he was going to present a series of moral dialogues. And you can see it right there, hidden in plain sight on their own posters, right below the main title, a series of moral dialogues. It was a brilliant bit of marketing. The message was, this isn't frivolous entertainment, this is moral instruction. This is good for you. And that simple promise allowed them to perform Shakespeare in cities that would have otherwise shut them right down. And guess what? It totally worked. The merged troupe, which they now called the American Company, was able to tour all up and down the colonies, from Charleston to Newport. By refusing to let tragedy and intolerance stop them, they built the very foundation of the American stage. When you think about it, from a failing theater in London to a seasick rehearsal on the Atlantic, every Broadway musical, every play, every piece of American performance art owes a tiny debt to that one desperate gamble on the Charming Sally. It really makes you wonder, what would our culture even look like without it?